Good evening, everybody. I'm Stephen Child, the Clerk of the Joint Public Protection Committee, and I'd like to welcome you all to the meeting. I'm opening the meeting because our Chairman, Councillor Jeffries, has had to give his apologies. So before we start, I'm just explaining for the benefit of members of the public who may be watching that this meeting has been held both over Teams and with councillors present here in the chamber at Bracknell Forest Council. The meeting is being live streamed on YouTube, so members of the public can follow proceedings. Committee members in attendance this evening, Councillors Mary Temberton, Nick Allen and Therese Welsh from Bracknell Forest, and Councillors Justin Pemberton and Howard Wollaston from West Berkshire Council. Members are being supported by a number of officers from the two partner authorities from the Public Protection Partnership. Votes this evening, members of the committee here in the chamber are the only ones who can take part in the formal decision, and they will vote by raising their physical hands. Please can I just ask everyone present in the meeting area to make sure you switch your microphones on when invited to speak directly into them and switch off when you've finished. Thank you. So the first item on the agenda is apologies for absence, and I can confirm apologies have been received from Councillors Iskander Jeffries and Jeremy Cottam. Councillor Mary Temberton is substituting for Councillor Jeffries. Moving to item 2, which is to appoint a Vice Chairman for the remainder of this municipal year. So I will seek nominations for Vice Chairman. Any proposals?
Yeah, I'd like to propose Councillor Jeffries for Vice Chairman. Sorry, who we're opposing? Councillor Pemberton, sorry.
Could I second, please?
Thank you, and seconder as well. Thank you, Councillor Wollaston. Are there any other nominations? No. In that case, I'll put that proposal to the vote. All those in favour, please show. Thank you. That is unanimous. And I can now confirm that Councillor Justin Pemberton is our Vice Chairman for the remainder of this year. And as I've already said, in the Chairman's absence, I want to ask Councillor Pemberton to chair the meeting.
Very willing to, but I can't find the papers. Oh no, sorry, wrong one.
Thank you, Mr. Chard. So, as chairman of the meeting, I'm going to move us on to item number 3 in tonight's agenda, which is the minutes. And I'm going to ask if members are willing to accept the previous minutes as an accurate record of the meetings held on the 10th of June 2024, 7th of October 2024, and the 11th of October 2024. Could I, first of all, have a proposal to approve the minutes, please?
Happy to propose.
Councillor Wollaston, thank you. And a seconder?
Councillor Allen, happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. Please can members vote by raising their hand if they agree that the minutes can be signed as a true and accurate record of the previous minutes. Thank you, members. That is unanimous, and I can confirm that those minutes have been approved. Subject to any amendments which have been proposed, no amendments as far as I am aware, and I will sign a copy of those minutes now. Thank you, Mr. Child. Moving on to item number 4, outstanding actions from the previous meetings. Mr. Child, I am of the understanding that there are some outstanding items relating to matters that were brought to the March 2024 meeting. Is that correct?
Sorry, Chairman, just to say, there are 2 outstanding items that are both scheduled to come to the March 2025 meeting. So unless members have got anything further to add, that's no further update is needed.
Okay, before we move on, do members have anything further to add? Okay, I shall take silence as no. Agenda item number 5. Could I ask Mr. Chard if we've had any declarations ahead of the meeting?
Chairman, no, we haven't had any in advance. Are there any from the floor?
non-declared, Mr. Chard. Item number 6. As far as I'm aware, there are no public questions that have been received which relate either to a general issue concerned with the work of the PPP or to an item on the agenda. Are you able to confirm if that's correct?
Correct. No questions received.
Thank you. Moving on to item number 7, the forward plan. Can I ask members and officers if they have any changes that need to be made to the existing forward plan? Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Chairman. So just to say that obviously when I get onto the update report, you'll be aware that there is a peer review being undertaken. So once we've got the outcome of that review, that will need to go onto the forward plan, and it may well be that we need to put an additional meeting in to just look at the outcomes of that. If it's not ready, well, I'm hoping it will be ready to come back at the March meeting. Thank you. So, but at the moment, it's not currently on the plan, I don't believe.
Okay, so subject to any unforeseen events or additional time to consider the report that comes out of that, that will come back to the March 2025 meeting of the JPPC. Okay, thank you, Mr. Murphy. Do any other members have any changes that they wish to make to the forward plan? Okay, thank you very much. So with that, I shall move on to item number 8, which is the Public Protection Partnership Service update and Quarter 2 report for the municipal year 2024 to 25. And I'm going to ask Sean Murphy to introduce the report. Thanks.
Thank you, Chairman. So Moira will pick up any questions on the actual performance report at Appendix A. But I'll just very, very quickly run through the update report. So in financial terms, apart from the known pressure that I think we've mentioned at the previous meeting within Bracknell, we're still predicting a end-of-year zero outturn. To do that, obviously, we've had to manage income pressures and things like that within the in-year, and the report talks a little bit about how we've done that and where some of those have come from. So just moving on quickly to the issue of risk. So the key risk has been recently is around the operational and management capacity. But there are some good news that I'll come on to when we talk about where we've got to with recruitment recently. We've had a bit of a sort of change of fortune in terms of being able to recruit. But what we are doing in the meantime, whilst we have vacancies and in line with the decisions of this committee, we're focusing on the priority areas that were set for us by the committee, and those that were here last time will know what those are. And also we are, and then with the rest of the resource, we are risk assessing as we go through, basically to ensure that we focus what resource we have on the most critical areas and the areas with the biggest risk of detriment or harm. So just moving into the body of the report, I've mentioned the finance already, but some good news in terms of recruitment. We have now been able to recruit somebody to pick up the age-restricted product. So this is the 12-month contract, and this is the grant-funded work that we're doing with the grant that was around offensive weapons, but we're also going to look at alcohol, vapes and other areas. That isn't just about enforcement, but that will also be working with retailers and work in schools as well. We have 2 environmental health staff starting in January. So I think one's the first week, one's the second week in January, which is positive. The good news is we've recruited to the vacant private sector housing post, which is really important given the priority that the committee has set for us around private sector housing and the issues around housing. But also it's been obviously vacant for a little while. We did have to hold it to balance the budget, and that's caused sort of difficulties elsewhere in the service with a large number of staff reporting to the strategic manager. So we have got a combination of contracted fixed term staff in and casual contracts doing some food hygiene. So again, that was another area that was identified by the committee as a priority area. And we've had to bring in some locum legal support as a result of the strategic manager for case management post being vacant, and also another team member being off for some time. So they're in post now, and we're looking to catch up. The strategic management manager for case management, so this is the head of the case management unit. She left in July. I've put this post has been advertised 4 times without success. It closed again today, and we can now make that 5 times without success. So we do need to go back to the drawing board and have a look at that. We've had a few people less of service, 6.3, and we've advertised for a trading standard or a financial investigator, and I'm pleased to say that it's still open, but we have had some promising looking applicants. We've got a couple of staff basically reducing hours, and we've also got a couple of people, or the couple of equivalent of a couple of FTE retiring. So just moving on into training and development, we have had somebody qualifies as an advanced practitioner in age-restricted products. We've got somebody started in September on the high certificate in food hygiene inspections, which will give us more capacity in due course. ICT update very quickly. So we are now so Damien and I have met with the procurement team, and we're now going to be looking at basically the procurement for the next round for the IT system, which will basically need to be procured by next year. So very quickly, events at 8.3, a whole range of them. So we did most of the summer fairs in Bracknell. There were other West Berkshire events, but they fell into Q1, I believe, didn't they? So that we do try and do a good spread in each. I won't go through the FOI figures and things like that and the member inquiries. They're all there for you to see. The peer review I've mentioned. So in terms of communities, a wide range of event monitoring, both across Q1 and Q2, and obviously we're continuing with that, and we continue in that right now, and with events like, for example, Lapland, where we're going, and we have been doing visits and things. Again, some more details there around some of the work around community work, so pest control dogs, that type of thing. Operation Albion, so that was the work around offensive weapons that I mentioned, and the work that we're doing there. There's a summary at 9.10. Further work that we've carried out in relation to the online sale of vapes, that's funded work, and we're now doing some work on vapes that claim to be 0% zero nicotine. So we'll report back basically on the results of that. Big focus at 10.2 at the moment on unlicensed HMOs. So we have been going through lists of premises where where concerns have been raised. We have visited a number of those, so we have identified a sort of hard list of ones that we feel that we need to visit, basically based on data that we've accessed through various sources. And at 10.4 and 10.5, there are a couple of examples there of when we have turned up at HMOs, we have, or unlicensed HMOs, some quite serious examples of the state of the property, and in fact we did have to serve some prohibition notices on those. So just very quickly into other areas around housing. You can see the service request numbers there, so they're pretty steady. Still a chunk of those relate to registered social landlords. That's set out in column 3, and the committee asked for those details previously, so we brought those to you. Information around nuisance is set out. You see we've had quite a lot of domestic noise nuisance requests, or nuisance requests, or 227 in Q2, whole range of things. But we dealt with a lot of them through negotiation, and we do deal with stuff but through mediation. However, we did serve one abatement notice, and In fact, it says one abatement notice was served to abate the noise of a cockerel and another from a barking dog. So I guess that's 2 abatement notices. Okay, victim fraud I'll come on to later on because there's a separate report on that. Work in schools that we're doing around underage tales, and then obviously there's a little bit of more information at 12.11 and 12.12 around that. I won't cover the consumer stuff because again I'll cover a lot of that. Just to say just a couple of ones that we have been working on for some time. So we did a project to look at retailers of e-bikes and scooters to assess compliance. We didn't find any major issues, but this is one of those surveys that the government asked us to have a look at. It was a priority area for them. We are doing some other work around so things like scooters and e-bikes and things like that, and particularly around storage in HMOs because of the risk posed by lithium batteries. Just to make sure that people are aware of that. A lot of work around second-hand car dealers at 14.3, and we have a number of undertakings that we're taking up with a number of car dealers across the 2 authorities, basically asking for improvements in the way that they deal with things. Safety workplace is one of the other priorities, 16.1. So we dealt with 54 health and safety requests, 33 workplace accidents. One issue which is interesting at 16.3, we are going to do a survey of barbers and hairdressers, but particularly barbers. So there's obviously, you'd be aware there's a lot of new barbers and things like that opened, but we have had a couple of incidents of ringworm. And when we've actually visited, basically there have been concerns identified about disinfection. So we're going to look at some of the ones that are new. And it was interesting that this broke as a national story actually a couple of weeks back. Food hygiene inspections we're getting back on top of, and we hope to be a lot closer basically to full catch up by the end of the year. And case management investigations I'll pick up when we come back to the fraud report. So I'll stop there, conscious of time, and I'm happy to answer any questions that the committee may have.
Thank you for that report, Mr. Murphy. Do members have any questions in response to that? Councillor Wilson.
More an observation than anything else. I'm looking at the stats that you've put in this report. It looks like your workload has gone up dramatically.
In terms of the stats at appendix,
Right through the report,
Yeah,
everything
yeah.
seems to have gone up.
so I think that's probably a fair assessment. So we are finding that basically there is increases in a whole range of areas for us. And it's a time when we're trying to catch up in other areas where there are some legacy issues like food. So it is a real challenge, and that's one of the reasons why we came back to the committee in October, as you know, to talk about where you wanted us to prioritise resource. But yes, I mean it is the story of where we are. Demand is going up. There's no sign of that abating. I mean, there's a whole raft of new legislation on the way for public protection. So you've got the tobacco and vaping bill, which will be in due course. You've got the renters rights bill, which will have significant new responsibilities for the service. And then there is a whole new consumer bill as well, which is due in. In fact, it's in, but the implementation dates haven't been put in.
As supplementary in that case, is that going to cause a resource issue in over the next 2-3 years?
Well, this is one of the reasons. Thank you for the question. It's a really important question. This is one of the reasons why we've been planning through the workforce strategy to bring people through. So what we have been doing is we've been bringing not just new people into the service, and we did bring 4 people in at level 4 into the service, but we've actually basically been training people that were already in the service in technical roles into professional roles. So over the next 2 or 3 years, we should have an increase in the number of environmental health officers by 3, and the number of training standards officers by 2. And then some other specialists like the food hygiene inspector role that I talked about. And meanwhile, we'll continue to bring people through at level 4, and hopefully we'll have a steady stream of people basically to meet this new demand. But we have fundamentally kind of reworked the balance in the service, because obviously not everything requires an experienced environmental health officer or training standards officer. We're just trying to make sure that we've got enough people at each of the levels, basically, so that we can get the work done in the most efficiently and cost-effective way.
Do members have any more questions? Councillor Welsh.
Thank you. It's great to hear, obviously, your recruitment has improved. It's fantastic to hear about the roles that you have recruited for. But can I just ask about, obviously, the vacancy for the strategic manager? You mentioning that that's now been advertised 5 times. What have you done differently each time you've advertised it? And have you identified what you could do differently to make somebody or get more applicants for this role?
So I think it's just a market problem. So it is a legal role. It's for a lawyer. Basically, it's a very competitive market out there. I think one of the things we'll have to do is to have a look at the job and maybe whether the job itself needs re-evaluating if we're going to have some success with that. But that is a tricky role for us, because what it does mean is that obviously we've got somebody acting up into a chunk of that role, but some of the rest of it is falling to me and 1 or 2 others to try and cover off. And with the peer review coming up and the service reviews and everything else, I really do need that capacity to focus elsewhere. One thing I forgot to say, because we include these things in at Appendix B, there is a selection of the kind of thanks that we're getting. So I think that that is nice for the officers to do, and we're just very keen to keep bringing examples of that back to this committee so that you can see. Otherwise, we can tell you there's been 7 complaints about the service. You can see there's been an awful lot more compliments, and this is just a snapshot. So. I do need to go away, Councillor Welsh, and review that post, because we definitely need to fill it.
Councillor Temperton.
Can I just, did you mention that you were going to do a review on vapes now? I think you said after the knives it was included in the vapes. And can I just ask if that's just sale of vapes, or are you analysing what's in the vapes? Because it is changing, and I heard recently that some of them have got lead in, and when you think how hard we all work to stop lead in our environment, the fact these kids are, or whoever it is, taking it straight in with inhaling it is just terrifying.
Thank you for that, Leader. So the basically, in terms of vapes, we have responsibility for the whole remit. So that includes the labelling of them, the composition of them, and also the sale of them to children, or to young people, I should say, not necessarily children. So we do work in all 3 of those areas, and we have sent, as part of the Operation Joseph that I mentioned in there, we did get some funding from government, and we have sent a lot of them off to labs for analysis. I mean, what we found actually basically is a lot of the stated, what's the word I'm looking for? The stated nicotine levels and compositions and quantities and all of that kind of stuff are all over that. There's a lot of variation between some of that stuff. So, but yes, we do send them off to labs, and we do get basically the contents of them analysed, and we have seized a fair number basically over the last couple of years, which are non-compliant, either because they've got too much nicotine in, or they're effectively, the volume of them is too high. One other area which we will have responsibility for, so the government have announced a ban on disposable vapes from next year, and the responsibility for enforcing that will also fall to the Public Protection Service.
Well, thank you for that, and good luck.
Well, I would hope that, what we tend to find is that compliance, hopefully a lot of them will just disappear from the market. But there was some story today, I think, I heard on the way in, about the number of disposable vapes that are disposed of every week. It was some phenomenal 8 million or something a week of disposable vapes. So yeah, it's like anything. I would imagine that basically from obviously lots of premises they'll disappear, but I expect somebody somewhere will be selling them, and hopefully it's our job to try and find them.
Any more questions? No, a couple from the chair, if it's okay, Mr. Murphy. When I look at the nuisance requests that we've received and the relatively low level of abatement notices that are issued against those requests, is that a reflection of staffing pressures in that area, or the PPP's desire to take a more flexible conciliatory approach, a combination of the two? It just seems quite low, and I don't know how that corresponds to historic trends.
I mean, to be fair, that does look like a low figure for that quarter, and I think previous reports have indicated presumably higher levels of abatements. But as you recall, that last time, I think, or the time before, we did have the nuisance policy come to the committee for approval, and the policy basically that we've adopted, or you've adopted as a committee, is that we take an incremental approach. So that we could quite often deal with things in the first instance. Quite often people don't know that they're causing a nuisance. The second thing is that we do basically offer mediation, and that we can mediate out a number of the difficult cases if people will participate in mediation. But ultimately, the vast majority of can be dealt with that way, and then occasionally we get some that we can't deal with it other than by abatement. So there is abatement as well. I think there was one other mention in the report about an abatement on a commercial nuisance. So there was 2 on domestic nuisance, but I think in the report we actually did serve an abatement on a commercial nuisance which was caused by vibration, I think, from what I recall. But yes, they are relatively. They do feel like quite low figures for that quarter. But I'll take it that we had some success in resolving them otherwise.
And just one last one. Do you think there's any particular reason why there seems to be a spike in issues with barber shops, either not being licensed or not complying with requirements? So
what we've done, I don't know whether you know, so under the Berkshire Act, a very old piece of Berkshire County Council legislation going back, I think, to the 80s or something like that, we had a local act. So barbers and hairdressers have to be registered with the local authority. So the first thing we've done is to identify those ones basically, so we've got a list of the ones that have registered with us, and in fact a number of the new ones that have opened have registered with us, but I can see just looking at the list that a number of them haven't. So the first thing we need to do basically is to ensure that they are registered with the authorities, with Bracknell and West Berkshire, and then moving on from that, basically we are going to do a public health survey basically of disinfection regimes in these premises, because obviously some of the new I'm not really up on, as you can tell, on kind of modern haircuts, but I understand that basically with some of the kind of new hairstyles and cuts that there's a much more severe, let's call it that. Yeah, so that's definitely not me. A much more kind of severe approach to that, and obviously the risk then of skin lesions and infections and things like that is higher. So yeah, so we're going to get out there basically and inspect them, and we'll be able to report back, I think, certainly by the next committee, as how that's gone.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Do we have any more questions from members? Okay, so with that, we'll move on to agenda item number 9, which is the air quality status reports for this year 2024. And I believe Rosalind Gator is introducing that report. I think you may be on mute, Rosalind. Or an issue at our end. We're just going to check. Rosalind, did you want to try and speak again? See if we can hear you.
Hello? Does that come through now? April 10th.
Rosalind, did you want to try again? Okay, Rosalind. Hopefully, in the time it takes us to do that, we'll have fixed whatever is preventing us from hearing you. Is that okay? Wonderful. Thanks very much. Can I ask Mr. Murphy to introduce item number 10, please?
Thank you, Chairman. So this is a report on effectively the work that the Trading Standards Service and associated Service of Financial Intelligence Unit Intelligence team and the legal team deal with to do with fraud. So this work is actually done across the three areas, so West Berkshire, Bracknell and Wokingham. And this was identified in June 24 and confirmed in October 24 as a priority for the three authorities. I think it's fair to say that fraud is one of the, it's obviously one of the most common crimes in England, but I think it's one of the issues of our time. And it accounts at the moment for 40% of all crimes. This report doesn't just cover fraud, it also covers basically what we call unfair trading. So there are regulatory offences, and then sitting alongside that basically is the kind of mainstream fraudulent offences that you would identify. So that would include effectively obtaining property by deception, I suppose, really. So false representations, but also it would include things like forgery and counterfeiting, and also areas like company fraud, so basically people being party to companies run for fraudulent purposes, as well as money laundering. A lot of this is is linked to organised crime groups, and as a result of that we work very closely with a range of organisations, including obviously Thames Valley Police, as well as South East Regional Organised Crime Unit, and occasionally some of the other regional organised crime units when the activity crosses into their areas. It's high impact, as will be talked in the past about how we measure basically what the risk is and how we prioritise, but this is very, very high impact. And I've taken out, so at 4.7 of the report, you can see examples there basically of real quotes from victim impact statements that were presented to the court. We routinely now get impact statements, and sometimes the victims read them out themselves, other times we present them to the court for the victims, and obviously they're put before the court before any sentencing. So then move on to talk about the different types. So there is a type that quite often used to be called kind of scams. So that was a whole range of things, and back in the day it used to be kind of letters, and then it moved on to sort of telephone scams or telephone fraud, and now basically there is a whole range of online frauds, as people will know, and it's very, very easy to fall for those. I mean, I think even myself in the past I've ended up having to change passwords and things like that in a moment of just seeing something. You know, when you're busy, anybody can fall for those type of things. And we do have basically an officer, and we have had some funding from all three authorities. So it's funding that's come from either community safety funds or from the Police and Crime Commissioner Fund, basically to support victims of this type of crime, and to actually put in place interventions for those people. And that quite often involves working with families, even things like mail redirects, but commonly it will include things like installation of call blockers and things like that, basically, where we identify those. I think going back to the other report, it did say that we'd actually saved or recovered, I think, just on that area of our work alone, something like 280,000. I think it was on the previous paper, for people. So one of the things we will do basically is we will advocate for people in that area. So basically, if they're looking to try and make a claim or to work with the Financial Ombudsman, we will help people to do that. So moving on to the main body of the report, the 4.11, I explain how we approach it. So we use this model called the National Intelligence Model, and basically what that says is we look at every issue from the point of view of what preventative actions can we take, what intelligence can we gather, and what are the appropriate enforcement steps for us to be taking. So Prevention Intelligence Enforcement PI is the main way that we work. So from 4.13 onwards, I talk about some of the preventative steps. I've talked about things like call blockers and things like that. But we also do basically checks on people, wellbeing surveys. After installation, we put in some cases things like doorbell cameras that we're able to use and to gather evidence if we have concerns. A lot of talks, a lot of work with banks, and I'm working with bank staff to identify risks of financial abuse. Some work around cold calling zones, and then working with adult social care. And this is one of the areas actually I had a meeting with adult social care last week in West Berkshire, and I will be arranging a meeting with adult social care here to see what more we can do to support victims. Because as I say, the vast majority of these people certainly are older. It's not uncommon for them to be in their 70s. It's certainly not uncommon for them to be in their 80s. And I think the oldest victim I've ever seen in any of our cases was 99. So, and so becoming a victim of this type of fraud is basically kind of life-changing stuff. It kind of destroys confidence and quite often their ability to live in their own home. So in terms of other preventative measures, all our staff are required to have safeguarding training, and because we do see this as primarily a safeguarding issue as well as an investigation issue, and we do work, and I think, you know, so we have worked with the police on training and also on some proactive rogue trader, what we call rogue trader days, but this is effectively driving around the area and challenging people that are working on properties. The vast majority of whom, of course, are legitimate and actually are very pleased to see us, because actually they also are victims of people who basically commit fraud. Whole section there on intelligence, and I think this has been a game changer for us. So we now have access to a whole suite of intelligence, whether that's citizens' advice data that's taken from the National Line Action Fraud data, but also basically we are able to get information as we need it, and appropriately, of course, from things like National Police Computer, HMRC, DWP, and various other networks. And then moving on to enforcement itself, there's two or three aspects of this. One of them, as I've mentioned, the preventative stuff. We also have what we call a rapid response protocol. So effectively, if we are notified of a householder-related crime, unfair trading or fraud, then officers would seek to attend immediately, wherever that is, basically. And we have a protocol whereby we would call the police if we think that we're going to need support to do that. And vice versa, we ask the police to call us if they've identified something that they have concerns about. Say we talked about working with partners. One of the other big game changers now is the work that we do around proceeds of crime and money laundering in particular. So what that enables us to do basically is we follow the trail of money from those involved in these type of activities, so unfair trading and fraud. And we follow that trail of money. Obviously, what we tend to do at the same time is to pick up other victims, and which is why some of the cases get quite big. We have people who are trained to deal with victims who are vulnerable. So we have people who are trained to undertake what we call special measures. So effectively, if so for example, if they're elderly or ill, not just if they're elderly, but for example, if they've got signs of dementia or other things, we are able to take video recorded evidence which can be used in court. And then just moving on, and then we're supported, of course, by the fact that we've got our own case management unit, which again has been very helpful. So just since the beginning of April this year, in terms of fraud that we've identified in relation to victims within the PPP area, and that isn't all of it, obviously, because we've identified lots of victims outside our area as a result of our investigations. The identified loss is 946,000 so far. So, I mean, that will easily top probably 1.5, maybe 2 million by the end of the financial year. It's 131 incidents. There's 19 live operations at level 2 and level 3. So they are cases where basically the fraud, the perpetrators have operated across more than one local authority boundary. And just to say that we do apply for financial support. So where we've got a case where we've got people inside the PPP authority areas in Wokingham as well, sorry, the Trading Standards Authority areas, and we've got victims outside, we will apply for funding basically for those cases, basically to fund the activity, because it's clearly not right that the authorities pay for activity outside of our area, but it is right that we investigate them because we have an obligation to put the full facts before the court. So it's no point just telling them about, say, one victim in Bracknell when we know there's two over the border as well. So we do apply for funding on that. So it's a complex area of work. It's an area that I think we're making impacts in. We have encouraged, it is an area where we encourage reporting. We still think it's probably underreported, significantly underreported, but I think it's 10 years ago, a lot of this wouldn't have been possible, but now with the intelligence and particularly the work that we're doing around money laundering and everything else, it's come all the way. It's come to the fore, and we're able to basically crack some of these very, very complex cases.
Thank you very much, Mr. Murphy. Do members have any questions on that report? Councillor Welsh.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask, what work are the banks doing? As you've identified, a lot of these victims will be perhaps over 70. And obviously with banks being open less often, I just wonder what work they're doing around that.
So the banks are actually doing, over the last 10 years or so, probably longer, they have moved to a position where they're taking a very proactive approach, because quite often they are the ones that end up losing the money themselves, basically, particularly from the sort of phishing scams and things like that. So they do take a very proactive approach, and in fact a number of the cases that we're dealing with are only with us because the bank actually called it in. So it's a concern. So if they identify somebody, if you were to walk in and turn around and say, I want to withdraw X £1,000, obviously the first question is, why do you want it? And they would seek basically to get to the bottom of that and understand that. And if they've got any concerns at all, they would contact the police or ourselves, and we would basically carry out an assessment and intervene. But it's still, the bank stuff is still, it still goes on. I mean, we still get videos of people being driven to cash points and all sorts of stuff. You know, that still goes on. The good thing is every cash point's got a camera. So, but yeah. I mean, the people are very vulnerable to this kind of activity.
Can I ask a
Templeton,
question?
yeah, Councillor Templeton.
I'd like to know what we can do. I've been caught with this. I got out of it quite at a hair's breadth. And I reported it and wrote in Great Hollands Matters and reported it to the police, reported it to you, loads of it, because it's such an easy thing. And I really nearly lost an enormous amount of money. And I just wonder what we can do to publicise and more aware that this can happen to everybody, because when it goes quiet, nobody knows, then that's when they all step in, and I think, I mean, you do feel terrible afterwards because you feel such a fool, and so to actually report it is really quite a difficult thing to do. But all those people now, I haven't seen an advert reminding anybody for quite a while, and I was wondering, you know, it goes quiet, and then that's when they all come in. So I was wondering what we can do and what the council can do and what others can do to actually make sure this is always a priority.
So thank you for that, Councillor Templeton. So you're absolutely right, and what we try and do is to go to the places where people gather. So effectively, we do sort of targeted groups and talks and things like that to people, but actually a lot of these people, unfortunately, aren't part of anything like that. So we talk about, you know, you can put things, you know, leaflets in certain places and things like that, and you know, we have done some work around that, but ultimately, basically, these are things that effectively people come into people's homes and do one way or another. They do it either electronically or they do it basically physically, and it's very, very difficult, as I say, because of the vulnerabilities of people. And you know, quite often when we find people who are victims, you can see how it's happened. And the other terrible thing about this is that we see many, many cases where people are repeat victims, particularly when it comes to sort of doorstep type crime. So the first person that may have come along might have charged them £5,000 or £10,000. The next person comes along and charges them 20 to put right the things that the first person did. The third person comes along and says they can get the money back from the first and second people, but they need to put it right. And it just goes on like that. And before you know it, people have lost well in excess of £150,000. It's not unusual to see that level of loss on one victim. But you're right, publicity, information, prevention is the absolute key to this. You know, because once it's happened, it's very difficult to put you know, the consequences of that back into a box. Prevention is absolutely key. It's perhaps one of those things we could have a conversation about any ideas that people have for other routes to prevention.
Do members have any more questions on that item? Okay, in that case, can I ask the clerk to read out the recommendations from this report, and then we'll need a proposer and seconder for the recommendations contained within section 2.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, so the recommendations before the committee, you've been informed about the contents of the report. The committee is asked to approve the approach being taken to tackle fraud, unfair trading and financial abuse, and to agree to receive a further update in December 2025. So, as the Chairman said, is there a proposer for that, please?
So I'm going to propose from the chair. Would one of the other members be willing to second? Thank you, Councillor Allen.
Councillor Alla, happy to second. Thank you.
Do you now conduct the vote, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, thank you. So in that case, I'll put that proposal to the vote. If members can show in favour. Thank you. Unanimous approval. Thank you.
Okay, with that, we'll now go back to item 9, the air quality status reports for this year, 2024. Hopefully we can now hear Rosalind Gator, who will introduce the reports. Rosalind, hopefully you can hear us and we can hear you. Nope, apparently not.
Yeah, I can't see why she wouldn't come through here. She's not muted in any way, so.
If he's willing, if Sean Murphy could introduce this report, and then we'll conclude this item in Ms Gator's absence. Is that acceptable procedurally? And are you happy to do that, Mr Murphy?
Right. Can you? Is that okay? So yes, Chairman, I'll try and talk through this report. So this is a report that comes every year to the committee. We are required by law to submit basically air quality status reports to DEFRA every year, and you can see at 5.2 that those were all submitted on the 14th of June. This is an area of work that we do in conjunction with Wokingham as well. So the scientific side for Wokingham is part of the arrangements that we have in place for Wokingham. So we submitted all three reports, and the report sets out the feedback that we received. So there was some positives, as you recall, prior to this. So DEFRA did recommend, as a result of last year's reports, that we could in fact remove both of the air quality management areas in West Berkshire, which we did, and they were revoked following the decision of this committee. And we were also pleased to be able to report that the A322 Bagshot Road in Bracknell, the air quality had improved significantly, and that one could be revoked. So we still have one air quality management area, and that is the one that's in Crowthorne, and then there is still one in Wokingham as well that we'll be working on. So the status reports were submitted. You can see basically the commentary. So the Bracknell report is set out. There is 7, and the commentary from DEFRA is set out at 7.11, and basically what the commentary says is that the report's well structured, details, provide information and the guidance on the basis of evidence provided by the local authority. The conclusions reached in the report are accepted for all sources and pollutants. So again, it's a sort of positive. I mean, they talk about a few grammar issues, but effectively it's a positive outcome in terms of that report. I think the other thing that's fair to say is that the following the revocation of the Bracknell Air Quality Management Area, the action plan for Crowthorne was reviewed and updated. And this was approved in March 2024 by the Joint Committee. So the fact that an authority doesn't, for example, like West Berkshire, doesn't have any air quality management areas doesn't mean that we haven't got responsibility for monitoring air quality. So monitoring continues, and we do basically do that. But what it does mean is those areas where we, for example, had continuous monitoring, like in Newbury Town Centre on the 339, that's now stopped, but we will continue to monitor air quality and continue to submit the annual status reports. So the West Berkshire one is set out at 8, and again So again, DEFRA were happy with the report, describing it's well structured, detailed, and provides information specified in the guidance. And again, they accepted all of the conclusions reached for all the sources and pollutants. They also noted the details included regarding PM 2.5, and there's some good quality graphs and trends. So effectively, I think the good news is that we have, by and large, good air quality. Obviously, we've still got the management area in Crowthorne. The action plan for Crowthorne has been updated. We'll continue to monitor and we'll continue to come back with the outcome of the annual assessments and status reports to the committee. And normally this is about this time, since it's about December, that we normally get them back sometime between the October and December meetings. So as I say, so next steps. The report says the new 24-29 action plan for Crowthorne has already been published, and we're working with other Bracknell Forest teams, notably Highways, Transport and Active Travel, to implement and progress the actions. And the West Berkshire Council Air Quality Strategy development has commenced. And I know for a fact that within West Berkshire that we're working with the team that are dealing with EVs and some of the other work that's going on around that as well. So I'm happy to try and answer any questions, but I think I think it's a good news story by and large. Basically, it's a good news position.
Thanks very much for that, Mr. Murphy. Thanks for stepping in at such short notice. Do members have any questions on the report? Councillor Wollaston.
Is there any reason why Wokingham doesn't have a report?
Yeah, because they're not part of the joint committee. So
why is it included in here in that case in the first place?
Oh, what, the fact that we've done it?
Yeah.
So that's a good question, actually. So yeah, it's a very good question. Why did we mention it at all? I guess just to say that basically it is an area of work that we undertake jointly with Wokingham, but obviously that goes through its own reporting mechanisms within the council.
Any more questions from members? I've got a couple quick ones. The air quality management area for Crowthorne goes through to 2029. Is there any particular reason it's set at a 5-year period? Is that because that's the period we envisage it will take to bring emission levels down, or is it a standard period with the aim to do it as quickly as possible?
I don't actually know why basically it's a 5-year plan. But do you know, Damien? Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. I think the date 24 to 29 is the DEFRA set date. Obviously, there are actions that we're working on to reduce the emissions within the Crowthorne air quality management area, which are set out in the report. We have seen quite a significant drop in that area, and we are anticipating that we might be able to revoke that air quality management area well before that 2029 date.
Thank you very much, Mr. James. And another final question. How well are we doing at anti-idling campaigns and reducing those kind of emissions?
So we have done a lot of work in those areas, and particularly outside key premises such as schools and other areas, basically where there may be more susceptibility to poor air quality. In fact, we did a lot of work in schools as well as basically monitoring across both authorities. We had a project looking at some of the busier school areas where we did some particulate monitoring as well. So this is the very small particles, PM 2.5. What we found actually was that the levels of PM 2.5 were okay, were good. But yes, we do push. We have been pushing the issue of idling and a lot of work around that with parents and in fact actually I think in Bracknell we did some work, didn't we, with the
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just in reference to Bracknell, we've worked with our colleagues in parking enforcement and have trained our enforcement officers. So when they're out on their beats, when they regularly could patrol around all of the schools in Bracknell, they have the understanding to be able to help educate drivers to turn off their vehicles. We are finding, obviously, with newer vehicles, then stop-start on the vehicles has improved, technology has improved that situation, but that alongside the education we found has worked very well.
Thank you very much. Any more questions from members? Councillor Temperton.
I'd just like to make a comment that the taxi drivers around by the station are really much better than they've ever been before, because I notice it every time, so I congratulate them, and then they all turn the engine off. No, it's all right. It's got much better than it used to be.
I think just say one thing. I mean, one of the issues is that vehicles aren't the only source of pollution, and there are other areas that we, so one of them is things like wood burning. And there are controls basically on the sale of wood that you are allowed to sell for burning purposes. But there has been a lot of focus actually recently on wood burners. But actually a lot of the particulates come from other aspects of transport. For example, just the rubber on roads and things like that from tyres and things like that does produce basically a lot of particulates in the but yes, certainly the levels of nitrous oxide, which is the one that is commonly associated with vehicles, have fallen significantly. As Damien said, actually, and I should have pointed out myself that the Crowthorne levels, basically, whilst the management area is still in place, the Crowthorne levels have fallen as well significantly.
It's definitely a good news report. Do members have any more questions, comments, anything they'd like to ask? Okay, so this item also requires a vote on the recommendations, which I will get the clerk, Mr. Chard, to read out in a moment. I'm going to propose those recommendations from the chair, and then when Mr. Chard finishes reading out the recommendations, if I could have a member to second those, and then we'll vote. Over to you, Mr. Chard. Thank you.
Certainly, Chairman. Yes, so the recommendations before members for this report. Majority are for information, so members have been informed about the contents of the 2 air quality status reports, have been informed about the feedback from DEFRA, have been informed about the progress on the measures to improve air quality set out in each report. The recommendation requiring approval is approval of the ongoing and planned future measures to improve air quality set out in each report. And lastly, information that the air quality status report produced by the service on behalf of Woking Borough Council has been submitted to DEFRA, feedback received, and both passed to that authority for processing under their own governance arrangements. And following on from Councillor Pemberton's proposal, do we have a seconder?
I'm happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor Welch. So, members, please show in favour. Thank you. Unanimous approval.
Thank you, Mr. Chard. So, with that, I will now note that all the business of the meeting has been concluded. Thank you to everyone who attended tonight. And just to note as well that the next meeting of the JPPC will take place on the 10th of March 2025 at West Berkshire Council offices. That is the conclusion of the meeting. Thank you.